Ho, ho, ho. Or should I say, ho, ho, ho.
Winter is the perfect time of the year for fear. The night dominates the day, life shrinks back before death. Sure, it can be cozy to snuggle up beside your loved ones with a mug of hot chocolate in your hands, around a raging fire in your hearth. But isn't that great comfort and coziness ultimately defined by the harsh conditions outside? The bliss around the fire only feels good due to the pain from the cold outside. The safety in your home is only so strong due to the risk in the outside world. Winter is a particularly dangerous, almost liminal feeling season that gets people in a particularly horrifying mood. And don't even get me started on the holidays and their associated myths. We've got creepy elves that supposedly move around the house to observe you day and night, calling to mind a kind of magical panopticon, to a supposedly jolly, rotund man who annually breaks the laws of time and space and property to enter your home and leave you presents. It's creepy. And many creators of the horrific and the bizarre have picked up on this, and have channeled the inherent fear of the season into works of wintry, holiday, Christmassy art, and that's what we will be exploring today. But my aim isn't just to go through the most obvious stuff. Some of what I will cover today will be popular, but some of the stuff I know none of you will have encountered before. And no, I did not watch, read, and play everything. This was just a scattershot attempt. Winter comes every year, so stay tuned for next year. There's always room for more. If your favorite media isn't mentioned here, mention it in the comments and maybe I can try to cover it. There are clear themes and topics for upcoming years that I'd love to review. Anyways, for your viewing pleasure and hopefully to provide you with some recommendations, I watched 8 movies, read 4 books and short stories, and played 4 video games. Like my other review roundups, I'll have these pieces of media ranked, with each item thoughtfully reviewed and lightly critiqued, with books, games, and movies each having their own separate rankings. And if you're coming here from a general audience and aren't familiar with the kind of books we talk about on this channel, consider yourself content warned. They are really messed up, seriously, and not just the books. Some of the movies are pretty dark too. Though everything today will only be discussed critically and tastefully, not sensationally. And really, I'll lightly mention these elements unless they're a major feature in the works themselves. And lastly, before I get started ranking and reviewing the films, if you like content like this, I would highly appreciate and encourage a subscription to my channel. My videos are mostly split between dark fiction and philosophy, with some critical video essays, and some like this, which are more fun, casual group reviews for recommendation purposes. I always try to make every video interesting and thought-provoking. And if you enjoy this video, a like is really appreciated. Anyways, let's dive into these movies, starting with my least favorite. Jack Frost. The first movie I watched was Jack Frost, directed by Troy Miller, a 1997 horror movie, black comedy. I don't know, this movie is neither scary nor funny. And apparently this crap is a cult classic, which really illustrates a new definition of that term, because you have to be brainwashed into liking this. It follows Sheriff Sam as he combats his resurrected nemesis and serial killer Jack Frost, who has taken on the form of a snowman. Now, before I watched this movie, I was all in. I was hoping for something stupid and silly, almost like the Nicolas Cage movie Willy's Wonderland. It's low budget and not great, but entertaining and at least tries. Jack Frost ruined that excitement within the first 5 minutes. It opens with an excruciatingly long title and credits sequence, which consists of sequential focuses on different Christmas tree ornaments, already a boring choice, while in the background, a man narrates the story of Jack Frost to an adult woman trying desperately to sound like a little girl.
Why did he hurt people?
How should I know?
The effect is a cloying anime voice, and just made me sick. And honestly, this opening credits scene really sums up the whole movie. What's happening on screen is completely uninteresting, and its boredom is enhanced by unnatural dialogue. Of course, the movie truly begins with Jack Frost in a prison transfer. How else could it begin? The prison van collides with a genetics research truck, and Jack Frost melts due to the experimental chemicals within and becomes one with the snow. Then he just starts killing people. The centerpiece of the movie ought to be the snowman. I mean, come on, a killer snowman named Jack Frost should be awesome. But he's not. Nearly every shot of him shows a completely motionless white mound. It doesn't even look goofy, it just looks pathetic. Look no further than his hands. They are just oven mitts painted white. He is constantly spouting one-liners, and one would expect a buffet of cringy snow puns, but half the time, we don't even get that. At one point, he just shouts, "Feed America!" Why? Seriously, it makes no sense. He does have one funny line. Well, it ain't fucking Frosty. And as you might expect, calling that funny is very generous. I call it funny because I nose snorted like 10% more air than would normally be contained in an average breath. If you scanned my brain, you might have noticed a neuron twitch. Really digging for anything here, folks. Even the kills are bland. The least you could hope for is some gore, and there is a tiny bit of it here and there, but we're mostly given scenes of a static white monolith staring menacingly, then it cuts to his oven mitt doing something, then it cuts to the victim's body. All the kills in this feel completely weightless and just like nothing. It doesn't feel like the Snowman did any of the murders, it's more like a disembodied white baseball glove did them. Otherwise, we follow boring and mostly undifferentiated townsfolk as they bumble around trying to stop Jack Frost. Their scenes are so unbelievably awkward. Someone could have shown me a bit of dialogue and told me that the Sora AI made it, and I literally would have believed it. Or actually doubted it, because Sora videos are too good compared to this. It's like the actors are aliens trying to be human beings. The reply timing is off, the ADR is bad, and the sentence flow is unnatural. Many of the characters' contributions to the conversations simply feel like non sequiturs, like the script was written by a random sentence generator. Jack Frost also, infamously, has a scene where the Snowman basically sexually assaults a woman to death. Of course, on screen, it's just the actress desperately trying to portray fear and anguish while a giant, shoddily made snowman puppet bumps her into the wall repeatedly. I couldn't even muster any kind of shock or offense or distaste for the scene. It was just dumb and incompetent. Like if someone smashed two Barbie dolls together and called that intercourse, that would have been more convincing. There are two good things about the movie. Well, calling them good is a misnomer. They are still bad, but compared to the rest of this letdown are cinematic divinity. One is the music. It's silly, but in a way that's actually funny. In one scene, when Jack Frost becomes a giant snowball, the characters feel the rumbling as he approaches. The music becomes like that of a western, and Sheriff Sam presses his hands down to the earth to feel the vibrations. It's a whatever scene, not extraordinary or hilarious, but it was enough to be notable against the otherwise incredibly bland snooze fest. I also think the shot composition, lighting, and camera work are okay. They sometimes give the illusion of a movie that was actually trying, and I was grateful for this deception. I don't know, I'm really soul-searching here. The movie was bad, not even so bad it's good. It was just lazy. Here, look at this shot where the characters are fleeing Jack Frost when he appears outside of the police station. As they turn and run, one of the actors' feet trips on the edge of the snow and reveals that it's just a white carpet. Like, y'all couldn't do a single extra take of that? Really? It's like you're trying to dispel any attempts to buy into the movie's world. For that reason, in my absurd rating system, Jack Frost gets a doo-doo batter filled with antifreeze. Okay, so we just finished the movie Jack Frost, and I want to introduce another element to this video, because right now it's just killer snowmen and pretty simple stuff, and by the end of this video I am crashing out at taffy excrement and horny elves and Nazi snowmen, so we're just going to introduce a sanity meter to keep track of my deteriorating mental health and just so you guys can laugh at my absolute torture. So at the end of every piece of media, there will be a slide showing where some points have been deducted from my sanity and exactly why, just so you can keep track of how much torture I'm in. So yeah, that should be fun. The Mean One. Okay. Thankfully, I'm happy to report that the rest of the movies here are all slightly enjoyable at minimum, after the cinematic grotesquerie that is Jack Frost. The Mean One is easily the worst of these, but it's actually kind of hard for me to say that. So, The Mean One, a Grinch slasher movie, was released in 2022 and was directed by Stephen Lamort. Despite what many of you are probably thinking, it isn't one of these movies like Winnie the Pooh, Blood and Honey, and Popeye the Slayer Man, where the characters recently went into the public domain and people capitalized on this with quick slasher reimaginings. No. This movie exists, somehow, by claiming it is a parody of the Grinch. It gets away with this by basically not saying the word Grinch and cutting out the Dr. Seuss aesthetic, but keeping the Grinch character under the name The Mean One, albeit making him mostly a monster. So yeah, as I said earlier, this is probably the worst movie above Jack Frost. In fact, it might actually be the worst movie on this list, but for me, this kind of brought up a difficult question to answer that I wasn't sure how to settle. I think that The Mean One is basically a case of a group of passionate and motivated filmmakers being held back by an extremely low budget. And in that case, do I rate the movie as it is? That doesn't really seem fair. But at the same time, as a work of art, it still isn't exactly amazing. My compromise is basically that I'm going to rank it pretty low, but still rank it higher than Jack Frost because at least this didn't feel lazy to me. Anyways, the basic plot of this is a reimagining of the Grinch story. The so-called Mean One is attempting to rob the house of a girl named Cindy. She finds him in the act and gives him a necklace. Then his heart grows 3 sizes and he is reformed. Well, that's how the story should have gone down, a poetic Seussian narrator informs us. But actually, in this universe, Cindy's mom walks in and interrupts the Mean One's redemption, inciting a struggle where she is then killed. Cindy then calls him a monster for killing her mom. This causes the Mean One to go on a reign of terror, and Cindy to have PTSD, until she returns 20 years later to finish this unfinished business. The movie was written by the same guy who wrote a bunch of direct-to-DVD Disney sequels, which reminds me of that Family Guy joke.
I mean, look at this. Aladdin 4. Jafar may need glasses. Number 1.
The writing is actually not the worst thing in the world, though. In fact, in many places, the dialogue and performances were startlingly natural and funny. I'm thinking especially of the dialogue between Cindy and Detective Burke, her love interest. So props to their actors. In fact, Cindy's actress is normally a stunt performer, which makes a lot of sense given that they actually have a literal training montage with her later in the movie. Otherwise, though, there are some disastrously bad lines, as one would expect. In fact, the entire thing resembles a Hallmark movie, which is just never a good thing. I have to comment, of course, on the Mean One himself. He's played by Art the Clown, David Howard Thornton, who I think they kind of wasted in the role. Half the time the Mean One is on screen, he's like monstrously roaring. It's insane to me to get David Howard Thornton, an actor who has proven himself to be an expert in pantomime, and not make him play that up the entire time. This is supposed to be the Grinch, not the Yeti. There are a couple scenes where he does a good, cartoony, Jim Carrey-esque impression, particularly a massacre scene in a bar, which is easily the best scene in the movie, and where I'm assuming the entire budget went to. Thornton hams it up, it has the most on-screen gore and makeup, and the most visible fight choreography. We also get the best look at him here, and his garb is absolutely stunning. He looks perfect. The gore really is a sore point for me as a fan of blood and guts, because the movie is consistently having to not portray it. It routinely has to, cleverly hide the on-screen violence. Again, presumably due to its budget. It's sad because, honestly, the gore and whatnot are otherwise the only entertaining things punctuating a movie that is mostly a Hallmark Christmas movie with some occasionally good lines. I also want to note that there are sometimes some Dr. Seuss sequences of poetry that bookend scenes, and those are amazing. They actually add a lot to this movie's festive atmosphere, and overall I'd say this movie is really one of the most festive ones on this list. Anyways, I think I've shown why there are hints of a good movie here, and while I haven't complained exhaustively about why this movie is bad, I think my occasional references to Hallmark movies and disastrous writing should be enough to get the picture. If you want a festive movie that has a fun enough spin on the Grinch, or if you want a murderous take on a normally innocent holiday character that's better than Jack Frost, I think that The Mean One is probably worth your time. For that reason, I'm going to give it a smashed gingerbread house. I Trapped the Devil. This movie is frustrating. I Trapped the Devil is a 2019 horror film directed by Josh Lobo. The plot of this one is that Matt and his wife Karen go completely unannounced and unwelcomed to the home of Matt's brother Steve for the holidays. Steve appears extremely disheveled and mentally ill, and eventually reveals that there is somebody in the basement that he claims to be the devil. What follows is definitely a movie. I'll start with the good, because I want to be a nice little YouTuber for Santa Claus, since as we'll see later, the dude can be real mean. This movie is pretty well acted, especially for a movie with actors I've never seen before. I watched this with a friend, and she made a comment during saying its performances felt like theater or stage performances, and I felt that to be pretty accurate, though I have absolutely no way of convincing you of that other than suggesting you watch the movie and see for yourself. I Trap the Devil also starts channeling what I think to be the true potency of winter holiday fear. I talked earlier in the introduction about the coziness of the holidays seemingly being defined by protection from the outside. But many movies today will instead focus on subverting that and asking rather, what happens if the coziness itself is the threat? Many times during the holidays, we are stuck at home with family, often extended family that we might not see much. We're close to people, spatially constrained, and ensorcelled by holiday ritual. But many of these movies weaponize this. Instead, the people around us become threats. The home becomes a claustrophobic trap, and the rituals of the holiday start to feel more like a sacrifice. I Trap the Devil is like this to a T. Matt and Karen are around Matt's estranged brother and can't relate to him. The house, and especially the basement, are a cramped, confusing maze, and through their interactions, literal buried demons begin to come up. I also found some of the shots to be genuinely quite beautiful and even clever. But that's the last nice thing I'll say here, because I think that's how this movie tricks a lot of people into thinking it's really good when it's not. Too many of us are suckers for dark, long shots and ambient music and slow burns, and we never actually ask, is this effective? I've seen a couple movies recently that are able to utilize this elevated horror aesthetic, but can't generate the substance behind it. And I think this is unfortunately one of them. Another example of this, to me, is the movie The Dark and the Wicked. The fact is, despite having the good look, this movie is just boring. It's a whole lot of nothing. That's not to say this movie doesn't try to be something. It does, for sure. But its dialogue often hints at things that never really come together. It tries to maybe make a statement about faith or grief, but the movie never actually goes anywhere with it. And I think, honestly, that the ending probably destroys those themes entirely. And whoever gave writer-director Josh Lobo a superficial explanation of the mantra, show, don't tell, they need to have their advice license revoked. Because, dude, this movie does not tell you anything. It's so hard to explain over a video because, yes, it obviously does say some things in the movie, but the way it will just completely gloss over important details, or brush them aside, or ask the audience to make unwarranted leaps in logic is pretty frustrating. Just look at anything to do with Steve's family, or really how he caught the supposed devil. The movie is ultimately asking you to piece together a puzzle that, first of all, you don't have all the pieces to, and second of all, you won't want to because the movie isn't very interesting otherwise. Oh, and the movie is not really that festive either. I rank I Trap the Devil above The Mean One because at least this was competently made, but this actually frustrated me a lot more. So for that reason, I give I Trap the Devil an awkward holiday dinner. P2. P2 is a movie that actually surprised me quite a bit, and one that really sets off the movies of high quality on this list. It seems to have a kind of negative critical reception, which is pretty baffling to me. Like, I don't think this movie is brilliant, but it's certainly not bad. P2 is a horror thriller directed by Frank Calhoun and was released in 2007. It follows businesswoman Angela as she's working late on Christmas Eve trying to close some deals or whatever people like this do. And as she finally attempts to leave, she discovers that her car has broken down and the doors are all locked, meaning she can't leave. I don't want to spoil anything else, so I'll just leave it at that. I'm going to praise the acting first. The two main performers, the first being Angela's actress Rachel Nichols and the other a spoiler, do an excellent job. One is unhinged but kind of disarming at times, and the other is fearful yet creative and defiant, and both are absolutely stellar and really carry the movie. Seriously, I think that without these two leads, P2 would be nowhere near as good as it is. P2 is also surprisingly a festive movie, I found. It was a really fun holiday watch. It has the music, the lights, the dinners, the cold, the annoyance with family. It has it all. P2 was basically inspired by women getting attacked in parking garages, hence the name P2, referring to the level of a parking garage. So the main driving force of the tension is Angela's evasion of her attacker through the parking garage. At first it's very entertaining and tense to watch, but eventually it gets kind of annoying. This was the movie's biggest flaw. The movie keeps asking us to actually believe that it is truly going to end with some big moment, and then dashes that hope every time. But it pulls this trick so much that the audience just stops believing it. It should truly take a lesson from the movie Eden Lake, which does this kind of thing way better, in my opinion. I get that P2 wants to create a tense experience and make the audience identify with Angela, and continually escalating and dashing our hopes can be an effective way of doing this, but it stays way too close to the line too much, and my own brain just checked out after a while, especially when the ways that the movie would find an excuse to continue became ever more nonsensical. Genuinely, this was for me the movie's only main flaw, and really only gets annoying towards the end, but yeah, it was really annoying. Otherwise, P2 was a surprisingly shocking, gritty movie. Some have called this exploitative, and that's pretty weird to me. I thought it was pretty tasteful and honestly realistic, if anything. Another interesting thing is that P2 is kind of a feminist movie, insofar as it is a movie about the horror of incels, or a kind of similar entitled guy. This discussion kind of risks spoiling the movie, so if you're interested, go watch it, though I will try not to give anything overtly away. Anyways, I was kind of impressed with this because I found the movie's villain to be echoing a lot of incel rhetoric a few years before it really came to prominence. And it's not just the movie's main villain. Angela also faces sexual harassment at work that she's forced to basically excuse. I appreciated this timely commentary, and I know other movies have done this before, obviously, but I still appreciated it. There's another movie on this list that deals with a similar theme of male entitlement to women's bodies, and I've been trying to think about why this surfaces so much in the genre of holiday horror. I guess because the holidays ultimately aggravate people's loneliness. It's where people are visibly with their loved ones, significant others included, and those without them may have their jealousy enhanced. And the holidays, more and more, seem to be seen as the season of getting rather than the season of giving. And really, if you haven't been getting for a while, taking seems to be the logical next step for these movies' unhinged villains. That's just my guess though, and there's probably room for an entire essay on this topic, so let me know if anybody's interested. Overall, I liked P2 quite a bit, especially because I thought it had a pretty interesting theme that was very well integrated to the plot, but its tension problem really frustrated me, so I feel uncomfortable placing it higher. For that reason, it gets a microwaved turkey and mashed potatoes. Santa's Sleigh. Y'all, I don't know what to say about this one. Santa's Sleigh is a 2005 black comedy horror movie about a killer Santa. Actually, he's the killer Santa. He's the Antichrist, who, after being forced to be nice for 1,000 years, finally gets to go back to being naughty. And Santa really likes being naughty. This one seems to get a good bit of hate online, but I don't know, at the end of the day, I'm a pretty simple guy. This is the same reason I rated Grandpappy at number 3 in my extreme horror ranking. If a work of art is entertaining and makes me laugh, and isn't otherwise too stupid or boring, I'm gonna place it highly. Santa's Sleigh achieved that. This movie entertained me. It made me laugh. It was everything I wanted from a Christmas horror movie about a killer Santa. Bad puns, dick jokes, Grandpa getting run over by a reindeer, rocket launcher reindeer barbecue, WWE wrestling Santa, Rankin and Bass animation. This is what Jack Frost should have been. Santa's Sleigh is festive and fun and goofy as all hell. That is the entire appeal of this movie to me, and honestly, I don't really even want to try to offer any criticism otherwise, because, sure, the movie isn't amazingly acted, it has a kind of weird, abrupt ending, the script is really stupid, and the effects are kind of terrible at times, but genuinely, who cares? If you watch a movie called Santa's Sleigh, and you critique it for those reasons, when it's fulfilling its main purpose, unlike Jack Frost and the Mean One, you're missing the point. Though, of course, it's fair to do so, blah 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 blah, but if you do that at my Christmas dinner table, I'll move you straight to the kids' table. At the adult table here, we like Santa's Sleigh. I also think it's cool that this movie flirts with the kind of dark origins of Santa. This is a topic that I want to explore a lot more next year, since Santa as a figure is actually a really rich mythological and philosophical figure, and there are a couple works of art that dig into and deconstruct the mythology surrounding his origins. Here, it's basically a Christian one, which I found to be pretty interesting and silly, where an angel beat Santa in a curling match and made him be nice. Side note, I went curling recently, and this is a very difficult sport. Hard on your knees. Alright, Unc. Anyways, Santa's Sleigh is a fun Christmas horror movie that I think is a great watch for that specific holiday. It's everything I wanted a goofy Santa slasher movie to be, but obviously isn't really that interesting outside of that, and so I give it a rocket launcher barbecued hell to your leg. Juicy. Dead End. Y'all, for this one, I'm trying desperately to be an unbiased reviewer here and push back slightly against my own personal enjoyment. I really enjoyed Dead End and wanted to place it at number 2 because this movie is my kind of movie, but I can acknowledge that it's not everyone's kind of movie. Dead End was released in 2003 and was directed by John Baptiste Andrea and Fabrice Canepa. It follows a family of 5 as they are driving to their family's home for Christmas Eve dinner when they decide to take a shortcut through the woods. Driver and patriarch Frank falls asleep at the wheel and nearly gets into a crash, but avoids it. Soon after, a woman in white clothing holding a baby appears on the road, seemingly in need of help, and eventually it becomes clear that this road may not be a normal one. I'm gonna try to be critical up front because otherwise I enjoy this movie a lot. And just a forewarning, I will stray into spoiler territory here, so if you really want to not be spoiled, I would highly recommend you go and watch this one yourself, because it is definitely worth it. Dead End gets a lot better as it goes along. As it begins, it's actually kind of an insufferable watch, mostly due to the son of the family, Richard. He's homophobic, crude, gross, and really annoying. The other characters at first seem mostly fine, but it's eventually revealed that, except for Brad, the boyfriend of daughter Marion, and Marion herself, everyone has dark secrets. Marion herself has one too, but hers is basically that she was pregnant and that she was going to dump Brad, while the others are pretty awful, like cheating and animal abuse. Now here's the big spoiler. The road is a never-ending one. They're stuck in a kind of hellish, absurd scenario, and they're getting picked off by a hearse following encounters with the woman in white. Now, the idea that everyone has some kind of dark secret and that everyone is really terrible and insufferable, to me was a hint that it's a kind of purgatory or hell scenario, like the movie Triangle. But I think this really gets into where I think the movie is a little frustrating. Dead End kind of doesn't really know what it wants to be, and uses the idea of open to interpretation as a shield. Whenever I watch a movie like this, just as a thought experiment, I try to at least imagine if the director knows what's going on within the movie. Now, this is a pretty flawed method, but I ask this question because it helps me guard against pieces of art that kind of throw a lot of random stuff at the wall just to be provocative and hope something sticks. And unfortunately, I think this kind of falls into that category. I really don't want to spoil anything here, but once you watch the movie, I think you'll see that no explanation really makes a lot of sense. Was it all a dream? Was it purgatory? Was it hell? Was it some kind of ghost, power, dimension thing? What's up with the guy at the end? Additionally, I think the entire movie is kind of rough. Like, the effects are less than perfect, some of the performances are less than perfect, the pacing is less than perfect. The movie just has this overall look that makes me think just one more pass at every aspect might have tightened up everything. But okay, I'm done being critical because I liked this movie. I don't really care that much about the explanation. Yes, it's annoying that the movie tries a bunch of random stuff, but really, I enjoyed how the movie made me feel. I haven't seen many movies that really got across that sense of the absurd, as described by Camus so well as this one. Dead End is existential and kind of nihilistic, and honestly, I love that. It puts its characters in a terrible scenario and affords them basically no hope, and forces them to create their own. It's a world where the only way to get through is just to keep forging on, to trust in your relationships, and to try and evade death if possible at all. Dead End genuinely felt kind of mythical, almost archetypal in a way, which is a very strange thing to say about an early 2000s horror movie with a soundtrack full of angsty grunge. And while I said the performances are kind of rough, that's not to say that some weren't notable. Lin Shaye's portrayal of an at first vulnerable, loving mother, and eventually an unhinged maniac, was so fun and engaging. And Ray Wise did a great job portraying a father who, while having what is probably a good heart, has been lost in the blindness of his ego. This is the kind of movie that ultimately really appeals to me. It's far from perfect, but it feels like it's gesturing at something profound. I didn't like that it seems to have tried to throw a bunch of crap at the wall to achieve that profundity, but nevertheless it did the job, and here I stand ranking it at number 3. Dead End isn't festive at all. In fact, it's basically a Christmas movie only due to its date, so don't watch it because of that. Watch it because it's a deep, interesting experience. For that reason, Dead End gets a kind of gross looking, but maybe good pie. Better Watch Out. Better Watch Out is a 2016 horror movie directed by Chris Peckover. I think for this one, I'm gonna have to be a little bit restrained and brief with my review because so much of this one depends on the plot and its story, and I really don't want to spoil anything. Better Watch Out follows babysitter Ashley and her 12-year-old baby sittee Luke as they have their last appointment before Ashley moves away. Luke is obsessed with Ashley romantically and tries to put the moves on her, but eventually his plan is put on hold when it appears that his house is getting robbed. Or maybe a horrific scenario is the perfect time for Luke to show just how much of a brave man he really is to win over Ashley. As I said, this one is really difficult to talk about without spoiling, so I'm going to be extremely careful here, and this segment will likely be a bit quicker than the others. I'm being so careful because I actually had the plot spoiled for me before I watched it, and it sucked, while my family had no idea what was going on and they loved it. I still enjoyed the movie a lot, but I know that Better Watch Out is best experienced with no foreknowledge. If I was going to sell the movie to those who haven't seen it while still continuing my very light review afterwards, I'd say Better Watch Out is a really fun, refreshing take on the Christmas home invasion story popularized by Home Alone, with some interesting social commentary and a very sleek modern aesthetic. Better Watch Out is similar to P2 in that it's a commentary on male entitlement. And I think Better Watch Out is the better of the two, though not by much, and it has a slightly different emphasis. Better Watch Out, aside from the number 1 spot, is probably the most clearly well-made movie here, so it's really difficult not to like. Of course, the actors also do a great job, particularly actor Levi Miller, who plays Luke. Jesus, what a performance. His voice cracks are so funny. I also love the set design. Better Watch Out is probably the most festive, Christmassy movie on this list, and clearly resembles holiday classics like Home Alone, and the movie's affluent mansion setting definitely fits this perfectly. My only real problem with the movie is that I wish they had leaned into the setup of the first part of the movie more so, hint. Now I say that, but I had the movie spoiled for me, so I didn't receive it very well, but everyone else that I watched it with did, and it kind of underscores the villain's plan and ultimately his immaturity, but I really don't want to get into that. Basically, that gripe is probably more of a thematic asset. I know this discussion was pretty unsatisfying because I didn't want to spoil anything. Just go watch the movie. It's really solid, very fun for the holidays, and will definitely satisfy your holiday horror craving. For that reason, it gets a morphine and pizza combo. Yummy. The Lodge. The Lodge is easily the best movie that I watched for this video, though it's also the heaviest thematically. It was released in 2019 and was directed by Veronica Franz and Severin Fiala. The setup is extremely simple. Richard, after his wife's death, takes his fiancée Grace and his 2 grieving children on a trip for Christmas to a remote lodge. The children don't like Grace at all, viewing her as a homewrecker, and the situation comes to a boiling point when Richard is called away for work, leaving Grace to take care of the children. And then everything just goes awry. Now, please, pause this silly video and watch the movie. It's so cool and awesome and worth your time. Seriously. I actually have no notes for this one. Absolute cinema. Well, in the spirit of generosity for the season of giving, I'll actually offer The Lodge the criticism that it drags for a little bit in the middle. Shave a few minutes, and this becomes near perfect. In fact, The Lodge, without spoiling the movie, is the most hopeless, nihilistic movie I've seen in a while. This movie takes no prisoners. It makes you root for everyone and nobody at the same time. It just sucks. It's scary not because of any jump scares. No, that's far too mundane for this movie. The Lodge is scary because your entire perception of the world could be a freaking lie, and this movie points it out. The way this movie plays with perception, dude, it's so cool. For example, regarding Grace, we initially follow Richard's estranged wife Laura. She catches a glimpse of Grace, and there, Grace is framed as explicitly scary and other. Then, after Laura's death, we follow the children for a time, where all the information about Grace is filtered entirely through their distorted, emotional lens. And admittedly, some of it doesn't sound too good. And then, when we finally meet Grace through their eyes, she seems fine. Not super outgoing, but friendly enough. But the POV slowly transitions to Grace, and the otherization of her stops, as we come to understand her as a character more and more, and really like her. And then, the Lodge rips our hearts in half. Just watch how this movie keeps toying with how your point of view influences your perceptions of the characters and the narrative. You'll notice how meticulous it is. I think this is where people get confused at the plot and write the movie off as having plot holes or whatever. And maybe The Lodge does have plot holes and I just didn't notice them. But I think The Lodge displaces the audience's empathy so frequently that it's easy to lose your way. But that's not a bad thing. I think that's the entire point. The Lodge is such a bleak and grim movie. It reveals a world where the only genuine way of relating to other people is just to navigate and merge with their delusions and egos. There's no such thing as love or meaning. There's just, is your current way of experiencing the world compatible with mine? And sometimes, worldviews and delusions and egos clash very, very harshly, to disastrous effect. The Lodge is a relativist nightmare world where our anchors are continually displaced. It casts us adrift in a sea of narrative chaos where we have nobody comfortable to follow, nobody true enough to believe, nobody innocent enough to root for, and nobody unbiased enough to listen to. And look, I've been pretty vocal that I'm a huge fanboy of the NBC show Hannibal. And some of my favorite things about that show are the dark, frequently hallucinatory visuals, and the messed up sound design, and the oppressive, suffocating atmosphere. That is what The Lodge is. It's a movie version of that. Every bit of it. It's a movie version of the aesthetic of a Hannibal episode. How could I not love that? The Lodge is not festive. Festivity is a fucking illusion. You might as well make a shadow puppet on the wall and call that Santa Claus. That's the message of this movie. I loved it. Watch it and feel bad about how desperately you cling to your illusions. For this reason, I give the movie a plate of heated, nutritious matter designated by my biological algorithm for consumption. Alright, those were all the movies I watched. I'd say everything above I Trapped the Devil is probably worth watching, with a slight recommendation for the mean one if you're bored and a huge fan of the Grinch. Now I'll move to the video game portion of the video. For those sadists among you who wanted me to play scary games, well, here you go. I hope you're happy. Okay, I'm in this little room. I can't remember if she pops her head. Oh my god! What the fuck?! Oh my god. Oh, Jesus. Alright. I played 4 Christmas horror games for this video, and surprisingly, there weren't as many as I thought. Before I start the ranking, I want to say up front that I noticed for these that the problems here made themselves very evident. Problems in a book or a movie are often subtle and sometimes hard to point out and explain, but problems in a video game, especially glitches, make themselves very apparent. I think because of this, I come across very negatively in the next section, and while I stand by every criticism I make, I can also acknowledge that if you want to play a Christmassy horror game, all of these will do the job. Seriously. Okay, with that said, on to the ranking. I'll start with my least favorite and move to my most favorite. Also, all of these were available on Steam, and that's where I got them from. September 7th. September 7th was the third of the 4 games that I played. It was directed by Emika Games, a solo project by developer Alexander Reshetnikov. That is a Russian name. September 7th was developed in Russian, and translated into many different other languages. I'll come back to this. It follows Dima as he returns to his apartment from school. His girlfriend Anya left him a little present with a creepy little elf doll inside. Despite it not being Christmas, The doll introduces a Christmas-themed haunting to Dima's apartment, and creepy stuff goes on from there. I want to remark on the translation now, which has both superficial and gameplay relevant problems. At one point, when about to complete the final chore, the subtitle says, "It remains to take out the trash," or something like that, when it should be something like, "All that's left is to take out the trash," which, as a learner of Polish, is a common Slavic language translation issue, so I'm not unsympathetic to that. But there were moments when the translation issue affected the gameplay. At one point, the ghost has you solve a puzzle, and the hint is, how many knives did I hide in 3 drawers in the kitchen? When in reality, the game actually hid all the knives inside of a single cabinet, not 3 drawers. This may seem like a nitpick, and none of what else I'll say here has anything to do with translation at all, but it really is a major gameplay problem when considering September 7th's mechanics, because the game is a walking simulator where you have to find and click items in the correct order. But the items aren't highlighted, and sometimes the click indicator doesn't pop up immediately if your cursor merely passes over the item. So, in my run, I wasted a lot of time and energy just frantically passing my mouse over literally every single patch of virtual space. A standout offender was when the game had me looking for a crowbar. I looked and looked, but didn't see it at all. I had to watch a YouTube video to see that I had to find a note before the crowbar would spawn. There was genuinely no indication that the crowbar hadn't spawned, and the note was not in an obvious spot either. There were other frustrating moments, but this was the only one that made me look anything up. Unfortunately, these frustrating experiences really destroyed my enjoyment of the game. Sure, there were creepy moments, but overwhelmingly, the formula for the scares was just look in somewhere, turn around, a spooky ghost appears with a loud noise, and then disappears. As far as I can tell, you can't die on September 7th, the scares are purely visual, so there was no dynamic gameplay tension, just jump scares, which rely purely on immersion, but my immersion was continually ruined by the frustrating gameplay. Overall though, the game ran smoothly and has excellent lighting and environmental setup. The animations were all good, and maybe I'm a simple guy, but I always enjoy a cramped, claustrophobic nighttime experience. The game effectively channeled that feeling of being trapped in a tight space with something dangerous, and that was nice. Additionally, the progression of scare intensity was mostly logical, though predictable. I'd say it was reasonably festive, though not overly, especially because it doesn't actually take place on Christmas. There are lights and decorations, but they feel like creepy window dressing and only exist because of the haunting that is centered around Christmas for whatever reason. September 7th wasn't a terrible experience, but it was definitely a frustrating one, and there were better games that I played. Tattletail. The last game I played was Tattletail, developed by Waygetter Electronics. Unlike September 7th, it's not a walking simulator, it's more of an enhanced hide-and-seek kind of game. The plot follows a child, 5 days before Christmas, opening their gift early to find Tattletail inside. It's a creepy, talking, Furby-looking doll that has to stay fed, brushed, and charged, and needs to stay in the light. And if any of those conditions aren't met, it will start whining. At first, you as the child have pretty basic fun interactions with Tattletail, but eventually, the outmoded model Mama comes to life and begins hunting you. Honestly, this game was less scary than September 7th, but also much less frustrating, which is why I place it one spot higher. This kind of delves into how horror games need to create and maintain fear, but Tattletail had quick respawns, frequent checkpoints, and highly exploitable enemy mechanics that made me completely unafraid. The basic gameplay loop here is that, at times, Mama will start hunting the child, but the child will have something to complete while they're being hunted. Sometimes it's traversal, sometimes mere survival. When the child isn't holding a Tattletail doll, these sections are extraordinarily easy if slightly tedious. Mama isn't really a roving enemy, more of a teleporting obstacle that will occasionally shut off your flashlight. But many times I was able to get her to despawn just by looking around a corner for a second, and then I could resume my journey. It gets a lot harder when you're holding the Tattletail doll. The doll's hunger, grooming, and energy bars deplete quickly, and it will whine very loudly if Mama shuts off the flashlight. So many times, whether or not I was able to succeed in a mission felt pretty out of my control. Sometimes there was genuinely nothing I could do because Tattletail was too loud, and Mama, who was blocking the way to the necessary bar refills, would come kill me. But this was actually a good thing, as it would respawn me and give Tattletail full energy bars. This made it to where, at times, I would seek out getting killed just to be able to better beat the missions. And again, respawning is very quick and the checkpoints were quite frequent. Getting killed rarely meant going back more than a minute or two, so it never bothered me at all. And thus, I never felt any fear or genuine tension once I figured this out. Really, this isn't a problem unique to Tattletail. The game Outlast wasn't scary to me either once I realized that I could outrun every enemy. I enjoy the annoying talking toy aspect, and the graphics were okay. Tattletail didn't have any fluff and was a pretty quick experience. There was some DLC available that I won't check out, because while Tattletail wasn't frustrating to me, it also wasn't very fun or scary. And festivity-wise, Tattletail is a complete flop. It takes place near Christmas and evokes the opening Christmas present early thing that I'm sure a lot of us did as kids, but it lacked the vibe of Christmas. There wasn't Christmas music, there were barely any lights or decorations. Tattletail is mostly set around Christmas for the convenient excuse to give the child a new toy, and doesn't inform the gameplay or environment much outside of that. I mean, geez, there isn't even any snow. And yeah, I know that it's not always winter for Christmas around the world. Tattletail isn't a bad game, but it isn't a very good Christmas game and is mostly a flat experience rather than anything creepy or fun. There were better games that I checked out. Crimson Snow. Crimson Snow, developed by Step Hare Studio, was the first of these games that I played, and admittedly that may have colored my viewpoint a little bit. I don't play a ton of video games, much less horror games, despite me often using Dead Space as background footage, so Crimson Snow had the luck to catch me before any fatigue settled in, but I think I enjoyed it beyond that. Crimson Snow is an erotic thriller game where you're being chased by your ex-girlfriend who has turned into a hot demon lady and really wants to get back with you. And I mean, come on. Who wouldn't want this absolute baddie? Just kidding. I mean, the rough details of the plot are correct, but it's not an erotic thriller, unless you're skilled like me and are able to make it into one. Oh my god. I submit to you. I submit to you. Come please. Yes. This is all I ever wanted.
You weird, buddy. You're weird!
Just kidding again, that's the last joke. Anyways, Crimson Snow is basically a walking simulator game where you roam around a distorted, creepy house trying to avoid your haunted ex at Christmas time. You solve simple puzzles, and occasionally interact with your fiancée over the phone and offer her advice, as she's in the same situation as you. I don't have a ton of complaints about this game, honestly, other than the extremely shallow mechanics. Crimson Snow is a very basic stealth game where the enemy's detection is based on a very limited line of sight, and the enemy's path is just back and forth. So the game ends up being a process of figuring out the ex-girlfriend's path, walking a slight distance behind her until you can enter some side path, wait for her to double back, then go to your objective. This isn't a bad way to make a game, but it isn't a particularly inspiring one. Additionally, Crimson Snow has the same problem as Tattletail, where sometimes, aside from the motive to submit to your hot demon ex, it was often optimal to let the enemy kill you. You get no benefit from it, but rather than running away and hiding, if that was even possible, I would just let her kill me and respawn with more knowledge of her walking route. Lastly, I have to mention the traversal speed. Mostly it was fine, but when the player had to squeeze through an obstacle, it became way too slow, though I know those were just poorly hidden loading screens. Otherwise though, the game was pretty creepy. A few of the early jump scares had me actually screaming, and they continued to be somewhat unpredictable. Crimson Snow had a lot of downtime where you actually begin to feel safe, and then something spooky would happen to remind me that I wasn't safe at all. Additionally, the ex-girlfriend's uncanny movements were genuinely unsettling. Her arms raised, head tilted back run, her awkward, broken shambling, and her dangerously high level of flexibility all got under my skin. The graphics were alright, though I preferred them in September 7th, but honestly, Crimson Snow had a much more festive atmosphere. It has the music, the lights, the proper context, and the familial connection that is so important for the holidays. This is the first game that actually felt like a proper Christmas game, and I really appreciated that. Along with its passable gameplay and genuinely creepy moments, Crimson Snow is the first game here that I can genuinely recommend, but it's not the best. Christmas Massacre. Christmas Massacre was developed by indie horror legend Puppet Combo, though shockingly, this was the first of theirs that I've played. The game is basically a murder simulator, and I've seen it compared to the infamous Manhunt. It follows Larry over a period of 20 years as he commits murders at the behest of his talking Christmas tree. Yeah, you heard that right. And that's basically the plot. You murder, sleep, listen to tree, and repeat. Now, my overall outlook on this game is quite positive, but I have a few issues with it. Larry's murderous days look like this. He wakes up and is then transported to some snowy liminal landscape where he goes to a marked location and enters. Inside, he has to kill everyone on the floor without letting anyone escape. People will try to escape if Larry is seen, or if they see a body, so you have to be very mindful of how you go about the level. Larry only has a knife with a slash attack that kills instantly but is messy, and a stab that takes 2 or 3 hits but doesn't tend to alert unaware enemies. He eventually accesses a one-hit kill throw attack and gets a flamethrower in the last level. That is Christmas Massacre, and I want to start off the analysis by saying this is the only game that is actually truly fun to play. There are frustrating aspects, but the core gameplay is responsive and visceral enough to where the mere act of moving Larry around is engaging. That already sets this game above the others, and keep that in mind as I critique it. Christmas Massacre's actual gameplay elements are rudimentary. Enemies spot you in an instant and immediately begin running, and the same happens if they see a body. And Larry can't actually move bodies, so one has to be very considerate where he kills. On a small level where every person is alone in separate rooms, that's fine and is very easy. It gets complicated later when enemies have much more complicated roving patterns, and some even spawn in as time goes on. You could kill someone in an out-of-the-way place, and then some enemy would spawn in later, walk to that location when you're in a completely different area, and then escape before you even know what's going on. At first, I hated this. I was trying to go through each level methodically, without being seen, and I was not doing well. And when the game would score me at the end of the level, I was getting abysmal scores. My time was too high, and my multipliers were too low because my kills were too spaced out. In this way, Christmas Massacre incentivizes the player to be as efficient as possible. It has near immediate respawns, practically screaming at the player to use trial and error to learn the quickest and easiest way to get through a level. There are later levels where it's actually impossible to not get caught, so the goal is to slaughter everyone before they can even think about escaping once they've seen you. When I figured this out, I had a much better time trying to optimize my route and get as high of a score as possible. This was a much more enjoyable way of playing. Unfortunately, it's not clear that this is the way to play either. For one, the game has a tutorial that all but tells you to try to not get caught, and to be methodical and stealthy. It literally tells you this is how to play. Additionally, on hard mode, the characters run very fast and Larry runs very noisily, so doing this quick, efficient thing can actually fail pretty badly when playing on the higher difficulty because you have to be near perfect with your knife throws and slashes. I think what I'm ultimately saying is that I wish Christmas Massacre had dedicated itself fully to being a game about doing the massacre as efficiently as possible or as methodically as possible, because as it stands, neither of them feel like the fully correct ways to play. And sure, the easy response is to say that it accommodates both playstyles, but that doesn't explain why it feels like both ways are also wrong. But anyways, while I dedicated a lot of time to discussing this problem, ultimately the core gameplay was still very enjoyable, and those are just wishes. I'm pretty sure Puppet Combo is just one guy, so I'm genuinely happy I got the game as it is. Is Christmas Massacre scary? One might think no, since you play as the killer, and that's definitely true. You are not threatened by anything in this game, and there are no jump scares. And the incentivization towards efficiency really limits the tension one might feel when a victim is escaping. However, Christmas Massacre actually is scary, though in a more abstract sense. Anyone who has played or watched a Puppet Combo game will know the kind of surreal, bizarre sense of dread the games are able to evoke. They channel that analog horror vibe that makes one feel as if they're in a nightmare. Of course, the talking Christmas tree and weird visions support this nightmare vibe, but the entire game is infected by a pervasive unreality. Interior layouts are nonsensical, the environments are nondescript, and the victims are robotic and empty. Sure, you're the predator in the game, but it feels like you're a predator in a predatory world. What cements this is the absolutely fantastic soundtrack. I really love a good surreal soundtrack in a movie, look no further than Begotten, and in those snowy landscapes, this droning, haunting noise is played that easily reinforces this nightmarish feeling. And when you're in Larry's home, a slow, distorted, creepy version of Silent Night plays on repeat. And the music within the levels themselves varies from more bizarre nightmare music to outright arcadey songs, and those are fun, but definitely not as nightmarish, though all are really good. Festivity-wise, I'd say it's pretty comparable to Crimson Snow. While in some cases it's actually less overtly Christmassy than Crimson Snow, I think the game's surreal, liminal atmosphere actually channels the magic of Christmas very, very effectively. Christmas Massacre feels hauntingly cozy. If I was going to recommend one game to play during the holidays, I'd recommend this one. Okay, I hope you scary game loving sadists are happy that you got me to torture myself with these scary games. Now let's move on to the book portion of the video. I read 4 books for this video, all of them either extreme horror, bizarro, or splatterpunk. And really, 3 of them are novellas, so this section is probably going to be pretty short. Regardless, let's dive in with my least favorite of the 4, and here I'm going to reissue that content warning from earlier with a particular emphasis on sexual violence. Fans of these types of books will know that you're almost never safe from this, but I want to make sure that the general audiences are aware that these books are really, really bad sometimes. And as a forewarning, I wasn't a huge fan of any of these. In fact, this was really an exercise in progressive, existential, and mental decay and torture for me. Santasploitation by Judith Sonnet. The title says it all. It's a story about the exploitation of Santa Claus. I'm being serious. The plot revolves around a plot to kidnap Santa Claus because a horny old woman wants to sexually assault him. Yeah. Let's see, what else happens here? We learn that Santa Claus is an alcoholic after Mrs. Claus cheated on him with Jack Frost. That's a funny enough idea, but somehow, in this book's intensely short span of barely 40 pages, it manages to become an overplayed joke. We also learn, very importantly, that Santa and the elves defecate taffy. Yeah, appetizing. Otherwise, there are some very silly Christmas-themed descriptions, and a few moments where I nose-laughed slightly, but I don't really get this book. It wasn't fun, or even that shocking or interesting. It was kind of just gross and stupid. Really, I'd say my main criticism is that this should have been longer. Give me more of an actual story with character development and some world building. Yeah, I know, it's called Santasploitation. What the hell else should I expect? But I don't even think the exploitation elements here are fully justified. Right now, it honestly just feels like someone wrote down bullet points of shocking stuff. Old woman wants to have sex with Santa. Santa is alcoholic. Mrs. Claus cheated. Santa poops taffy. LOL. Like, the story is actually so short and has such little build-up and overall development and context that what is there just doesn't work. We will see later that when leaned into, this kind of stuff can actually be sort of fun, but here it just reads like someone wrote some gross stuff about Santa in an afternoon and published it. It's a half measure, when it could have been something actually worth the reader's time. Anyways, it's a quick read, and if you're extremely bored and don't get offended by anything, Santasploitation will fill an hour of your time. But I think that's all it will offer. Here Comes Santa Claus, Edward Lee. I don't even know what's going on anymore. Whatever drug Edward Lee took to write this weird little story, I'm adding it to my Christmas list. I actually have no idea what happened in this book. It's so incoherent and disjointed. It opens following 2 absurdly potty-mouthed children as they discuss Santa Claus for 6 pages, and then the narrator just switches to Santa, and we completely forget about those 2 kids for the preceding 34 pages. I have no idea why those 2 kids are in the book. Maybe I missed them somewhere in this surreal nightmare of a story. Who knows? But regardless, it's a strange choice to open on and devote nearly a fifth of this book's very tight volume to them. Don't trust the cover of the book. Santa is not attacked by those kids. Then we follow Santa as he is delivering presents in the midst of an unpredicted storm where he's randomly teleported off course. He appears in like a nightmare Christmas warehouse. It turns out it's like hell or an alternate dimension or something. And yes, I'm spoiling the book, who cares? Because the demon lord of the world wants to impersonate Santa and pull off a crime resembling that of the Warlock plot from Halloween 3 Season of the Witch. Silliness ensues. So the book's plot is incoherent, the ending is completely abrupt, Santa's characterization is a little bit inconsistent, the prose is all over the place, with overt narrator asides that have little to do with the story. Like seriously, it's like the narrator is caught in an Adderall-fueled haze and just writes whatever pops into their mind. And of course, there's an abundance of poop and blood and dismemberment, as one would expect. Was the book fun? Yeah, pretty entertaining and goofy. Did it make sense? No. Was it festive? Yeah, enough. Would I recommend it? Above Santasploitation, but not strongly. Wishes Are Horses by Tim Eagle. I really dove in deep for you people here, okay? This 27-page story has 16 ratings on Goodreads at time of writing, so don't go telling Grandma that Branamander wasn't a good boy and didn't do his work for Christmas. Why are you telling Grandma anything about my work ethic? Who knows at this point? I think we have unhooked from reality by now. Wishes Are Horses is a micronovella about a really nasty couple who visit a Christmas tree farm and encounter something evil there. Content-wise, the extremity mostly comes from disgustingly bad hygiene and some associated interactions with said hygiene, and some pretty good gore, along with child abuse. The prose is actually decent, though I caught a few quirky points here and there that weren't really mistakes but didn't feel correct. This is otherwise a pretty solid horror short story. It is quite creepy, there's a sick monster that you won't fully understand but will be afraid of, and the character development is shockingly robust for the size of this little book. It reminds me of a micro version of Gone to See the Riverman. Now, I have little idea on the theme of this book, but at least there is something thematic that I can actually try to speculate on. Wishes are horses and beggars will ride them is the running phrase of the book and the origin of the extremely weird title. But I didn't really see how it factored in altogether. I would guess that it relates to the monster's victims and how they're hoping the monster won't catch them, as in they are steeped in denial of their doomed situation, and thus are riding the horse that is their wish to be in a different scenario, one in which they will live? I don't know. I guess really, I would love a longer treatment of this short story that expands on the book's lore. What we have is pretty compelling, and a few extra pages could tie up some of the unnecessary loose ends. I mean, yeah, this short inspired a pretty long review. There must be something good here. Like, I'm genuinely happy that this little story gave me something to think about, even if I'm kind of confused, because the last two stories left me just confused as to why I even read them in the first place. Also, the author read my confused review on Goodreads and thanked me. Seems like a chill person. Go check this one out if you have the time. Sausagey Santa by Carlton Mellick III. This book broke me. I'm gonna be honest, I'm kind of at a loss. I can't tell if I liked it or not, if there's something to get from it, or if it's just supposed to be fun, if these are binary options that the book should even be considered under. I just have no idea. Every time I opened this and read some absurd prose, I immediately began reflecting on the series of choices I've made in my life to where reading stuff like this is how I'm supposed to spend my time now. I mean, just listen to this short passage, please. Read at your humble narrator's excruciating pain right now. "Arr, you breakin' me heart, laddie," Santa says. "And you breakin' de elves' hearts too. They don't have much to do up here for fun in de North Pole, but have sex, you know?" Yeah, this book has horny elves, and it also has Nazi snowman, dominatrix women, and sausagey Santa, and God knows what else. I honestly don't even remember. At this point, I've actually forgotten how to structure a review too. My brain is so broken from these holiday horrors that I can no longer do it. I need to actually discuss the book, not just my existential unraveling. Sausagey Santa, despite my initial expectations, isn't a horror book. It's part of the bizarro genre, which I am pretty unfamiliar with. Just from this book, I'd say it's the genre of complete surreal subversion, and refusal to treat anything with weight or seriousness. It's an anti-genre where anything goes, as long as it's over the top. In this book, Santa is a cursed immortal who, for a while, didn't want to be immortal, and kept trying to kill himself. But he couldn't. Eventually, he ground himself up, wood chipper style, but didn't die. The aforementioned horny elves couldn't put him back together fully, so they just reformatted him into sausage links and arranged them into human shape. Yeah. And Santa was evil, that's why he was cursed. So at one point, in an effort to truly be good, he expelled all of his evil. But his evil took on a kind of life of its own as Frosty, because his evil part was also immortal. And Frosty became known as the, quote, neo-Nazi snowman of Satan. This cosmic holiday battle of good and evil between This cosmic holiday battle of good and evil between Santa and Frosty catches our narrator Matthew and his family in its wake, and he has to go on an adventure to save the day. Now, I rank this at the top. Oh my god, I'm literally crashing out. Now, I rank this at the top spot in the book category. Did I love it? No. I mostly rank it here because it's easily the most fully realized story and most professionally written. Like, despite how every line made me question my life choices, it felt like an actual book. But I didn't love it. I think the reason for this is that Sausagey Santa lives and dies on its humor, and I think Carlton Mellick and I are on slightly different wavelengths. I say slightly because it felt like stuff here could have been funny if just the manner of the delivery had been changed, or one slight aspect of the punchline had been changed, or any minute little thing really. Of course, I found a lot of the book to be amusing, but I never laughed, and I always found myself wanting to laugh, which for me only happens when I can see the vision of some joke, but it's just not reaching me. Now obviously that's subjective, and your mileage may vary. I can say one thing definitely. This book is offensive. Extremely offensive. Nothing is taken seriously in this bizarre book, even really heavy topics like sexual assault. This didn't bother me, but I can imagine that others will not like this at all, so I figured I should clarify that. Of the books I read, this and Wishes Are Horses are the only ones I'd say are probably worth checking out, and Sausagey Santa is really only above Wishes Are Horses because it's an actual full book. If you've got a few hours and want to have some light entertainment, this will definitely do the job. Just beware, because it will make you question things. Okay, wow, that wraps that video up. I hope you found something to check out in the next few days and weeks. I hope you enjoyed the mental toll this took on me as I explored the holiday horror iceberg of suffering. Subscribe for more torture. Have a nice time this season, everybody. Do some meditation. Try not to be too consumerist. Focus on your relationships. Donate some money to charity or something. Don't spend all your time locked indoors watching TV and reading. Get started early on those New Year's resolutions. And most importantly, watch more Brandamander videos. Thanks for watching, everybody. Love y'all.